in episode 10 of Tech It Up Talk. Tune into a discussion about leveraging technology to support English language learners with campus administrator Miss Elena SIlva-Leal and instructional technologist Miss Michele and Miss Arelys Barreto.
You ready? Here we go.
The Tech It Up Talk podcast aspires to educate, inform, and inspire educators from teachers to school leaders on tips, tools, and resources to support the integration of technology into classroom instruction. You're listening to Tech It Up Talk with Dr. Mac, your host with the most passion for supporting educators from teachers to school leaders with the integration of technology into instruction. In today's show, we are discussing leveraging technology to support English learners. And as you know, there are so many schools that are challenged with the growing community of English learners and implementing proper supports, resources, planning, and even managing instruction to provide them with an effective learning experience. And teachers of English learners are the first line of defense in providing them with a quality education, but are challenged with how to plan, how to differentiate for all learners, how to adhere to administrative expectations and testing requirements while still having to be culturally sensitive to meet the needs for all students. So in this episode, I am honored to have three guests who will be joining me in a discussion about challenges school space, our English learners and teachers are facing, and how we can leverage technology to support those challenges and enhance teaching and learning experience. So I'd like to give a warm welcome to my guests today, Miss Michele, Miss Elena SIlva-Leal, and Miss Arelys Barreto. So I'm going to welcome you guys on, and I'm switching now. So thank you guys for joining me today. It is a pleasure to have you all. If you can just quickly introduce yourselves and give us a little bit about your background before we begin.
All right, well, I'll go first. My name is Michele, and I am a former ESL teacher. And so I have that experience definitely of how are we looking, because I was directly in the classroom before I became a specialist, first an elementary science specialist, but then it ultimately evolved into becoming an instructional technology specialist or ed tech, whichever way you want to put it. So we have been looking at how do we reach all learners, but definitely one to deal with, especially today, is how does the English language learner learn virtually in an optimum and have an optimum experience.
So I'll go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Arelys Barreto, and I'm also have a bilingual ESL background. I was personally also as an ESL when I was growing up into school as well. So I do have that background experience of going through the whole process of being an EL personally and now teaching to those students. Yes, I've done elementary a lot too, several grade levels, several content. So I definitely have the experience when it comes to teaching us and leveraging the learners for them as well. And now I currently as well teach as a specialist, in the department where I currently am as also educator in instructional technology.
All right.
My name is Elena SIlva-Leal. I too have been in education for quite a while with different roles. For about 21 years, everything from pre-K to middle school to high school. It literally was, I needed a little bit more of a challenge every time. So I was like, I'll do a little bit older kids. I do a little bit older kids. But high school holds my heart. And then, so for me in the classroom, I didn't necessarily work specifically with ESL. I worked with ESL in the content area. So I not only had students with ESL backgrounds, not just one language, multiple languages, but I had your non-ESL students as well. So that was really exciting. And then from moving from a campus, I went into also district office supporting multiple campuses. And now I'm back on a campus, specifically serving ESL students because frankly, I miss the kids.
All right. Well, it's a pleasure to have you all on today to share your knowledge and your expertise to help better inform and educate other educators, enhancing their instructional practices, their systems, and their functionality, especially during this time period. And the goal of this episode is really to discuss how we can leverage technology to support our English learners and of course, as we know, COVID-19 has had such a major impact on education, and so many teachers have had to rapidly adjust their instructional practices, their instructional schedules from different instructional models, from face-to-face instruction to a virtual, hybrid, or concurrent teaching environment. And so, and we still have to support the various needs of our students today. And so we're going to go ahead and jump in and talk about, like, what were some challenges that you saw before COVID that were faced by teachers and schools prior to COVID-19?
Well, let me jump in on this one because I think we'll all agree with saying resources. Everyone keeps saying, what kind of resources do I have? And when I was an ESL teacher, and I think Arelys and Elena can also attest to this, I knew enough of the language because I do have, I'm half Mexican, half Filipino. So I know enough language to be dangerous, or I did then. I know way more now. But the thing is, it's that language of survival versus academic language is definitely what resources do we have, because we have district ones, but then teachers were constantly searching those out and then taking that to now the digital level. We'll get into that more later. But I think before it's just pretty much that. You ladies want to add into that one?
Well, and I think also, and not necessarily thinking just as with the ESL, like the English, and when you think of secondary, but just really teachers knowing and understanding the different language proficiency levels that there are. And then once you know what they are, okay, now what? How do I scaffold for each single level without watering down for one, and, making sure I'm building so that I can build this student to move forward. And then also understanding, even within your levels, when you think of your beginner level, so you have beginner, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high. When you have beginner intermediates, a lot of them are what you call a long-term. So a teacher then also has to know and recognize, okay, if you have a student that's been in L for more than 4 years, we've got to start looking at what else could it be. It might not be a language issue. So resources, I completely agree with you, but then it's also just that knowledge base of what do I do with every language level.
Right. Yes, I totally agree. I was about to say also that too, the proficiency levels. Also adding it to that, I also think that a lot of times the students feel very shy, especially when they're big newcomers. Mm-hmm. So they're very shy on top of everything that's being bombarded to them with the new language, the new culture of them. So a lot of times they're the shy ones, the quiet ones, and then go to that silent period a lot of times where they don't want to speak, but they're learning. You want to get to know more their level of English they have mastered, but they're shy because everything is too much for them. So obviously, I think also that's one more factor added to on top of all of this to them.
Right. Yeah. And so, now that we already had those challenges in place, and to have a pandemic come in and disrupt education completely. So, like, what are, I guess, some newer challenges that we're starting to see teachers, students, and schools start to face now?
Well, I think, and I think all of us felt that immediately with being in instructional tech. Suddenly we're like, oh, hey, we need to explain to everybody how to use this stuff. And it's how to use this stuff in a language that you or your family is going to understand, and B, do you have the device so that you can interface with your teachers in your school that is going to be viable enough to have, robust instruction, because a lot of them started in this time last year. We were just getting started with this conversation, but a lot of instruction got started on phones. And that personally made me just cringe on how can we have this tiny device to do that? And I think that was the biggest part of the transition. How do we get everybody on an equitable level?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Arelys.
No, I think adding to, yes, tool is great because we can do so much more with it. But also, in a way, I feel like it's not hindering, but like adding more to like of being, secretive in a sense, because like students, okay, I'm in the background. I just have to turn off my camera, and you cannot see my face. You cannot see really, am I understanding what you're giving me as an instruction when you're doing your instructions, or you're checking for understandings. I could just have Googled something, and then you might think like, oh yeah, I know the answer. Okay, this kid's good. But the reality, it's like helping some, but also you have to realize how the students are when they're live with the lesson. So I feel like that's also. part
Absolutely.
of it.
I'm going to agree wholeheartedly because, just language, just teaching in general, right? We when you're standing in front of a room full of children, you're reading the room. That's how you check for understanding. You're seeing the faces. When you see that glazed over look, you're like, hold on. Now I know I have to check right here. I got to pause. Well, when you're, you've got a laptop, sometimes they don't turn on those cameras. And so now the teacher then has to be very strategic and very specific as to how they check for understanding with all of the students. Okay, now let's add a language barrier where, like Arelys mentioned, there's an emotional disconnect. And so you've got all those different components that a teacher has to contend with and make sure she's building relationships. And then to Michele's point, with devices, as the administrator that was over the device distribution for secondary was a whole lot easier because we were 1-to-1 already, except for those freshmen coming in because we had to really teach them. It was a matter of making sure we taught them how to log on, how to do your basic functions, because no, a laptop is not a cell phone. I can get to Snapchat, WhatsApp, and all those other cool things. But it's different when you're using your technology for something professional, like your schoolwork. So it's making sure that they know how to do this and troubleshooting and like, what do you do when something's not working? So absolutely, guys, those are huge. And it's just a matter of like, how do you as a teacher really kind of, and an administrator too, because it's not just the teacher, how do you all just kind of build the student?
I want to jump back in on that troubleshooting piece because that is, the number one thing is that we've had to do. And I know that Arelys and I have had the fun of doing this in 2 languages of how do you support the learner in troubleshooting, but then also the family and keeping the family informed because now that, when we first started this, and a lot of our students are still virtual, so the family is involved in being part of the education, but they're trying to help the student if there is the mic's not working, the device isn't working, I can't log into X, Y, and Z. So, explaining all of these systems in 2 languages, if you can do it in 2 languages, because we're assuming Spanish, but like as Elena alluded to before, those are just 2 of the, 90 some bazillion languages that are here in the United States. So, right. We can do it in that. And then we're Googling, how do you say, check for this in this screen in some other language, that makes it even more fun. Anyway.
Well, with that said, so let's talk about what are some things that systems or some systems that schools should have in place to kind of help support and facilitate this process?
You have to know your community and,
yes.
For sure. And so I have the joy of supporting about 48 campuses right now. And I know that with those, I've had to look at the breakdown to say, okay, yeah, Spanish is number 1, but knowing that there is a Vietnamese community, there is a, Filipino community, there is, and within the Hispanic community, there are communities of, they speak Spanish, but some speak also other tribal languages. So knowing who's speaking what to get the supports to have, basic needs met as well as academic needs met is key. I think that's the first thing that comes to my brain so that we can go, okay, how are we translating so you know what to expect? And then we can get to the school stuff. So it's not just academics, it's how do we get through this life together?
Definitely. Adding to that, one thing that I'll also add to is just having like some sort of open labs for parents where they come in, they get some basic skills, how to help their child be able to log in successfully, be able to kind of just know the basis of where to go from and where to do their assignments. And, just that will also at the beginning, every school year, every semester, whatever, will definitely help. Or if they have new students coming in throughout the school year, have some labs in between throughout the year where they're teaching those parents those basic skills. And even the students too, they don't have to be just the parents, but just for those students who are new to technology, especially like I keep saying, when they're a newcomer, some of these kids, they didn't have a technology. They don't even know what was a computer because they didn't have it back home in their home country. So just doing those basic things also, I think, will help too.
Definitely the community, knowing what the family makeup is. So you're dealing with 2 different scenarios. So if it is a newcomer, many of our students in this, mostly last year that came to our schools, you have students that not necessarily are with their moms and dads. You have students that are maybe with their older siblings, an uncle, a friend of the family. So you really have to understand the family dynamic to know the level of, I don't want to say commitment because I think that's the wrong
support.
word. support that each student has, because these parents might have other smaller children that they're focusing on. And so the student might, in high school especially, might be the kind of on his own. So the open lab is really, really beneficial for the student. So we, orient the student on the device, walk them through, make sure they can get onto everything, make sure every teacher knows that this is a new student, and understand that they might need to troubleshoot. And then, like, again, where do you go when something goes wrong? One of the things that really was huge and beneficial for our campus was we created one-pagers, how to access this, and it was images. So not only words, but images as to what it looks like, what it should like, and what if it doesn't look this way. Again, who do you contact? All contact info. And I think, especially at the beginning of the year, we had just messages coming out the walls there, just in every direction. And it was really difficult to keep up with everything, but it was kind of fun and exciting because they were asking.
Yes.
They totally were. And on top of that, Elena, I know the one-pagers have been huge, and we've been tasked with, how do you do how-tos? Like the concept of the how-to, I hear that and I'm like, I already know about 50 more how-tos I want to make, but not just one-pagers, the videos. And I think having nonverbal videos that are just showing you literally, where do you click? Where do you do this? Wait for this to finish so you can do X, Y, Z. And I know I've produced a bunch. I have so many more I need to do. It's just finding the time to make sure of it. And also we want to make sure they're polished enough that it's getting to what the students need or the family needs, and then B, marketing it out there so people know, oh, this is where I go. Because I could produce so many things, but if the parents and the students don't know where these things are, they're just stuck in space, literally.
Yeah, well, I also think to that, I think schools, at the campus level should be putting those type of things in place and leveraging like the open labs, announcements, really enhancing their communication of how they communicate, especially now with students being virtual. Some students may be in class and teachers are having to teach concurrently. So effective communication, I think, is really key in keeping parents in the loop, keeping students in the loop of the learning process. And so let's now move on to so there are so many challenges that we're facing with the technology. You guys mentioned students being behind cameras, or at least you had mentioned earlier about, students were already shy before COVID. And then just to have another barrier of a camera and that you're hiding behind is now, adding more to that layer of kind of being in the background, and we're not sure if they're learning or not. And then also, too, I've heard teachers say that when they have students who are virtual, they're English learner students, they're also in their comfort zone of their environment where the language is where they're comfortable at. And so trying to bring them back to what it would have been if English is spoken around them more often has been a challenge too, because they're at home in their first language environment. And so what can teachers do to help support this process in class, or what technology can they use to kind of leverage the tools to help manage some of the challenges that they're going through?
So the things that come to mind, instructional tools, and we'll talk a lot, we're going to allude to these from here on out for sure, is which tools do you have that provide audio as well as visual? And I say visual because we do need to have kids be brave enough to be on screen, even if it's just for the teacher to view, so that they can see and hear and watch the pronunciation of things and read that kid. And so we've got to build a culture of trust between the student and the teacher, which is a lot harder when we're virtual with them, but it still has to be addressed. But also having those audio opportunities, or can I just voice record myself? And I don't care if the kid Googles and comes up with complete sentences and they're they're a level 1. If the kid is going to stumble through something they to read out loud, and they're practicing it, they're getting themselves into that language and being able to express themselves, and they get that most of it's there. And maybe the kid didn't produce all of it, but letting that student have that opportunity to try. And if it's just only audio or visual, so those opportunities have to be presented somehow.
Definitely, yes. I do see that when I was visiting campuses, a lot of students will actually go on Google Translate and just type in what they needed to do, for instance, and then they figure out how to answer in that way. A lot of times the students are fearful of not answering the right way. So they will try not to answer because they know, I might get it wrong. But a lot of students, when they got a hang of using tools, then they'll be more open up. Okay, just let me try if I could do a voiceover or, video. that definitely helps a lot of students.
So one of the things that you said, Jocelyn, is that, if the language primarily being spoken at home is Spanish or, Vietnamese or whatever it is that's being spoken, and then having those opportunities. So I think number one, as educators, it seems so much easier to just automatically start teaching them in their home language, especially at secondary level. Like, let's just, because it's more comfortable, let's do it. But they're not going to then acquire the English language. So you as the teacher have to make sure, as you mentioned, to have those opportunities. The scaffolds are really important when that input is being provided, right? And so that's number one major. Then you start talking about what is it that we as teachers can use. The groups, having the small group function in our teams, which is what we, our platform that we use in our district, is to have the students work in the small groups, because it really lowers the affective filter and it allows students to feel a little safer. So your students a level of language proficiency, you kind of understand where they are. Okay, so let's put maybe one of one level, one of another level that's a slightly higher, to kind of get them, build them, and really build a relationship. Because that's the one thing, if you have a good relationship with the teacher in the room, you feel comfortable, you're gonna make mistakes, but that teacher's not going to chastise you, or your colleagues, your peers, excuse me, are not going to make fun of you, because, especially when you're learning a language, I'm gonna tell you right now, as Latinos, we're going to laugh. That's not how you say that. That's our nature, right? And so, and vice versa, right? Learning Spanish, I had the same thing. Anyway, but you have the building the relationship. And so the different software, having structured conversations, a teacher plans, you create those opportunities. So then when you have that, you can, the student has that STEM, that language STEM that they can answer to. And then you have a with proficiency language development rubric. So you have an opportunity then to kind of, rate their language and see where they are. And then you have a one-on-one with the student and say, hey, Michele, this is how you're speaking. I know you just got here. You're right here when it comes to language. I want to get you here. This is what you need to do. So having those feedback conversations is really, yes, the technology is huge, but like, how do you then use the technology with that feedback component? So for sure.
And adding to that too, especially if the teacher knows the language of the student, right? And it's just easier, just like, let me just tell you in Spanish real quick. A lot of times we just that's our go-to when we are with the student. But if we don't try to use, like you said, those sentence stems, we don't try to use, those visual representations for them, we're not using those shelter instruction strategies within, the students are going to tune out of the language. So they're going to know, I'm just going to get in Spanish. So I don't really need to listen what she's doing, because I'm going to get in Spanish later, right? Or I'm going to get it in whatever language that teacher is able to connect with me. So it's really important to try to use all those tools so the students are able not to stay as a long-term L, and they're able to progress into the language and actually advance in the language domain.
And we're talking about technology, academically, but I had a teacher who I was supporting, and her class, like her entire ESL class, got together on WhatsApp, and that's how they were surviving with each other.
That's good.
And but I mean, that was at the beginning. So like last March, because like a lot of these kids dropped off the face of the earth. And so some of them were also going through other bigger issues. And I want to allude to that, because we're talking just school, but if they're newcomers or their families that are still finding their way here in America, they're not necessarily thinking about school. But this teacher, she stumbled on the fact that her class got together on WhatsApp and was like, are you okay? What's going on? She had a student who was working through asylum papers. She had another student who was getting threatened of being deported. They weren't worried about school. They were just like, how do I survive in America? And once they let her into that chat, it was that trust and that peace to say, okay, I'm going to help you with this. I'm going to find you the resource for that. And I need you to come do these assignments too, so we can better your language, so we can make sure you get across that stage and get that diploma to give you some credit, literally and figuratively. So it's also balancing that edge of life, because school is a ticket. It is a ticket, and it's the one that these kids, not every kid needs one, but even more so, we have to give those hoops and those beings. So recognizing those pieces that are going to let them focus on the classroom is also key. So whatever other technology we can leverage in for that is what we also, just being aware of what's out there for them and connecting with them in different ways.
Okay, well, let's go to what's out there. And so what are some things that are out there? And we can just go ahead and move to our next segment, which is get your tech together. And so what tech do teachers need to have in place to help support this process? And so we can be more specific with the tools and how they can help support some of those challenges with communicating. And also, I was thinking when you guys were discussing this, like even though for those teachers who don't speak the native language and they're having to still support students virtually and from my experience in supporting teachers, I find that some of the challenges they were facing that you mentioned earlier is hiding behind the camera, not being active participants in the learning. And so what tools can teachers implement to help support some of the challenges that they're going through?
I think the popular go-to has been any kind of translating tool. And, that's the thing. As a teacher, as an ESL teacher, I did have to tell my kids I didn't know the language, but I knew enough. I knew the bad words so they wouldn't try to just speak to me in just Spanish. But, and my colleagues all know this, like if I switch into Spanish, especially with someone that I don't know, the first thing I say in Spanish is pardon my grammar because it's lousy. And I am just trying to do it. And so I'm a language learner and I put it out there. And I think any teacher needs to put it out there on, I'm going to translate to figure it out to help you, but I'm a language learner and I will make you laugh at me in your language so that you can, get comfortable and know that, it's a two-way street. But those audio things, like are you using Audacity? Are you using Flipgrid and using the pixelated version to say, hey, you don't have to put your face out there? In the LMSs that you have, is there just an audio recording tool? Or do the kids even know on their laptop? Can they pick up the voice recorder and just play with that and then turn that in as part of an assignment or just to practice something? Those are the first tools that come to my mind.
Yeah, I'll definitely say Peer Deck is one of my big ones. We all have used it as we're teaching. It's great for students because if the teacher's showcasing the whole Peer Deck, whose responses are, they're not seeing their name. So they're not being dinged on, oh, I put in the wrong thing, or I put in the wrong answer to the assignment. Everybody's gonna laugh at me, right? So that, like you said, it lowers the affective filter on the students so they don't feel so, uncomfortable and uncertain how to answer. Peer Deck now also is able to use the immersive reader. So you just have to just turn it on. And for those beginner students or the newcomer, that's great that they're able to use that because that immersive reader, I think, is able to be embedded in a lot of different tools.
For some of our listeners who may not know what immersive reader is, can you kind of explain how the immersive reader works?
Yeah, so it's basically, it's a third-party app. And a lot of districts and across, they're using it where, depending on where the students are turning in their assignments or a platform they use in turning an assignment, it reads the text for them, right? Like kind of like a speech, reads for them. They can also select the translation piece of it in their native language. So not just for Spanish, but they have tons of different languages out there so they could click on. And then they'll read it out for them, fast, slower, in a voice of a man or a woman, whatever they feel like, right? If they click on the word, it gives you that visual representation of the definition of the word. So it's perfect for them too. So yes, I can understand this whole text that the teacher sent. If I don't want to translate it, right, I could definitely just pick out those 1 or 2 words, like, oh, what's this word again? And like it will say it and it'll show you that visual presentation if there's anything for that. So it's great. I love it.
So I'll piggyback on both of those because I think they both mentioned, because when you think of the TELPAS, right? So they have to read, write, speak, and listen. Like those are the 4 parts that they've got to master, right? And you've got all different levels. And so long as the teacher is using those PLDs, those proficiency language descriptor rubrics, to really give that feedback, I think both of the recommendations, those are key. Like that text to speech, using podcasts and audibles, those are huge for when, I'm learning to comprehend and read and understand words. I'm kind of following along. And then, you obviously want to record. So like Flipgrid or Voki, that software that allows you to record. But then how do you do that? So we want to explain to students, because we have to teach the whole class how to use these tools, right? So my favorite is going to be, and I'm going to say this wrong, it's the IO Rod. software. And so it's an extension to Chrome. And so what it does is you record, it's like almost like a screencast, but it tells the students, the learner, the viewer, where to click, how to get there, what to do. And so you can record, it's a voice. And so you show where to click, which you all know, all students learning technology, it's like, well, how do I get to, and then insert your learning platform, Schoology, It's Learning, Google Classroom, whatever it is. Where do I click? How do I get there? Where do I go next? How do I hover? So this way, IORod does the whole, it moves the mouse and the cursor, and the viewer can see, where do I click first? Now next, now third. And so it's a really cool how-to software.
You mentioned Chrome extensions, but I think, and I was going to add to Arelys' point, is that I would also like to share that there is a Chrome extension for Immersive Reader. And so it's, Immersive Reader is a Microsoft product, but of course, this is not an official Microsoft product, but it looks exactly the same and works the same. And so if you have your students have access to Chrome, they're able to install those extensions. They can leverage it for any web page. And so just about for anything that they're doing, and not necessarily have to rely on Google Translate to go type in the message, and they can do chunks of text at a time without having to copy and paste. And so I definitely say the Immersive Reader is, they can find it in many of their platforms they already have, like you guys mentioned, Flipgrid. It's in all the Microsoft products already. So if you're using OneNote, Microsoft Word, or PowerPoint, you still have those abilities to use that Immersive Reader. And also add those extensions. And so you mentioned an extension. And what was the name of that extension again? Because I've never heard of that one.
It's IORad.
IORad. So I'll make sure I check that out.
I need to check it out too.
And go ahead, Michele.
Well, it just made me think of another immersive reader that like our district already has that some people may not know about. And Kurzweil has been out there for doing reading for ages. And so that's a national tool that's been out there. But also it has a Chrome extension called Read the Web. And literally it does that. And I think it might be paid, or you might be able to get a freemium version of it. I'm not 100% sure, but I know our district has it, but not a lot of people are using it. So we just have to promote that as another tool out there. So going back to what are the tools that you've used before, and is there a Chrome extension for it? Like we've been all joking, there's an app for that, but now is there an extension for that? Right. Is what we really need to start asking ourselves, because they're there. We just don't always look at it. So when you said Chrome Web Store, I'm like, we need to go play a lot more in that store. That's the kind of shopping I think all of us need to do.
Definitely.
Yes, I love it. And, there's so many different tools out there, but also not just with the instruction, with the communicating piece with parents, even teachers leveraging the Google Translate themselves and having to quickly translate messages and to keep the communication piece, because there's Chrome extensions that will automatically do it for you. And communicate, or if you're using the Google Suite, you can automatically translate. So if you're doing like a newsletter and you're trying to help support parents who are supporting their students at home, especially at the elementary level, where a lot of the support is, with your new teacher aide, the parent that's at home, and they're having the same issues with the language barriers, and so even teachers taking that extra initiative to leverage different tools to translate and communicate with parents, to have that communication back and forth. And even if the parent communicates back in their native language, they can translate it just to keep that communication going. But I haven't seen a lot of teachers go back and forth with that type of communication, but I definitely think that is something that can help support the process so that our student is supported all the way around, not just in the classroom setting.
Also to add to that, I know Microsoft has a Microsoft Translate. It's an app or web, I can't remember right now, where it's constant. Like as I'm talking to you in English, it translates automatically to the person in their language that they need. They both log in some website, like they share a link, and that's not just have it constantly go with Google Translate, but this one's on the spot for them. So that's another one they could use too.
Yeah, well, and for those kids who are still in person,
I've
had experience when I'm supporting teachers, and I'll go into the classroom, and of course, I'll walk in. Students are shy; they don't want to speak their language, and I'll do what you had mentioned earlier about trying to be a language learner too, and to make them more comfortable with it. But, sometimes they say, I don't speak English. So, no problem. I'll pull up my my app, my Microsoft Translate app, and they have a two-way communication piece where I can program their native language on the other side and have mine on that side, and we can have a continuous conversation back and forth. So, of course, it's more challenging virtually, but for those teachers who are still in person, they can leverage Microsoft Translate in that aspect as well. So, are there any other tools that you think teachers should have in their toolbox?
Definitely, I would say Padlet too. There's so much more they can do within Padlet. You could do those, for them to respond orally, like we talked about, right? But also they could do some, when they do group assignments, they need somewhere they could represent visually. So if you do, there's one activity I used to do for my students where they can only use illustrations or pictures after they have read a text or something. So that's just a different way for them to just feel comfortable enough, like, this is what I understood, here are my visual representations. And they could definitely do that through Padlet as well. Padlet is, has so many more things that you can do within, but that'll be one tool I'll definitely add to my toolkit.
I'm going to add an oldie but a goodie, because we talked about Pear Deck, and Pear Deck is really, we've been using Pear Deck a lot this year, and I love it because there's so many different applications throughout the presentation mode of it, and it's, everybody can reach it. It's really cool, the visual stuff, and it's really neat. But Nearpod. It's like when you're first learning to really getting confident as the teacher, or even with your students, or you just want to do something different because everybody's doing Pear Deck, is Nearpod. So you can do your PowerPoint presentations, lots of visuals, still lots of interactivity with the student. And the student can't venture off anywhere because it's right there. They can't go ahead. They can't go behind. You have that right there for them. And I think that's one of my favorites. The other thing too, as a teacher, I want to see that my students are following along and doing right as I'm speaking. OneNotes. OneNotes are great, and the shared Google Docs are also great because you can watch the action happening live, and in the moment you can give that immediate feedback, because we got to think these are gamers, right? Our kids play video games, and that's all. What is it? Immediate gratification, instant gratification. And so that's what, if we can, as teachers, give them that immediate feedback on the OneNote or the Google Doc, that's another really great tool.
I agree with you on that one, Elena, because Google Slides, and you assign kids slides, for example, saying, okay, get this work done. Teacher can watch it in the moment and give that immediate feedback. And yeah, OneNote is a great tool too. And I know that Dr. Mag knows a lot about OneNote. So that's a whole other podcast, I'm thinking. But oh, nuts. Now I've totally forgotten, because you gave me an inspiration. It's gonna come back to me in about 3 minutes. Like, oh, this is what I meant to talk about.
I think there's another round, so you can do that.
Yeah, collaborative tools. And I'm sitting here going, it went with collaborative tools and YouTube. See, here's the thing, like, yeah, we use YouTube for entertainment, but the concept of a YouTube playlist. If I know my kids need to hear or see certain things, can I put together a series of videos for my kids to go with and be like, here's the link for it, and go to town finding, reading through this, listening through this playlist or watching this playlist. And yeah, my teacher's homework is I need to watch these videos. Let's go there if we need to, because it's getting those representations that are model representations, or maybe it's literature I need the kids to hear and to see in a different way than I'm using in class. That's an untapped area, in my opinion, of how can we use all that fun to make sure that it's being academically used for my kids and they get what I need them to get.
Right. Yeah. It can be used also for supporting parents. And so if you can put a playlist together, even if it's videos that maybe you created or videos you found that were beneficial, that were already posted by another YouTuber, you can create a playlist and just share that playlist link of parental support for instruction, and so that they can be in the loop of what the needs are, or maybe you guys are exploring something new and it's another communication tool. And a lot of the videos may have the caption at the bottom to kind of help support it, to reduce the speed on the video. That's the other thing I like about video, is that if the videos are playing too fast, the user on the other end has the ability to adjust how fast the playback is. And so if I need to stop and hear it again or hear it slower as I'm adapting to learning the language, I have that ability to do that. And so thank you for sharing that, Michele. So you guys shared some great things. So we talked about Flipgrid, which is an awesome tool for your English learners, especially kids love it because they like the stickers that are on there and all the cool things you can do. And it's video, but they also have the audio only mode, which you can use. And already, like Michele mentioned earlier, the pixelated view, but you can hear for them, give them a prompt. It has the immersive reader built in. And so if they need to translate to be able to participate into the learning, they can, but it gives them an opportunity to practice speaking or listen. Mm-hmm. So with Flipgrid, I love that you can insert videos and they can listen, and you can then have them practice writing separately and then go back and respond. And so Flipgrid is an amazing tool that you can use. And then we talked about Pear Deck. Of course, Pear Deck, I love it because you can sequence your instruction. And when you're done with it, you can turn it into self-paced mode and publish it back to your students as takeaways. And also in Pear Deck that I like that one of my other guests on the podcast mentioned that she does, that she gives private feedback. And so like when they're responding, because you can check my understanding for all. And she uses the private feedback feature to give feedback and not necessarily have to give the feedback in front of the whole class. You can give it back in real time, especially for those students who are on the other end of that camera who may not want to be heard or fearful of joining, saying something wrong. And so these are some great tools. And I hear Nearpod and OneNote. Of course, I'm a fan of OneNote. And it's definitely a great tool for teachers to use with collaborating with their students and seeing what they're doing in real time. And then, of course, the Google Suite is always awesome because you can see what they're doing in real time as well. And so these are all great things that teachers can have in their digital toolbox. So let's go to our last segment of the show now, which is the Tech Smackdown. And in the Tech Smackdown, we're going to end the show with your top 3 tips. And so I want my audience listeners to come back and tell me who they thought had the best tip. You can follow us at Take It Up Talk on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And so we would love to hear who you think is going to give the best tip. And so we have Michele, Arelys, Elena. You guys want to determine who goes first. We can do paper, rock, scissors if you want to. That has been a trend. Or you guys can just say who's going to go first with their top 3 tips to leave with our educators today.
I guess I'll say one because it's off the top of my head right now. Definitely, I'll probably use a Microsoft Whiteboard. I make sure I download the desktop version. It gives me more options. I'll be able, if I do a small group, for instance, all great tools overall to do a whole group. But if I need to do a small group, I need to see, if I'm a math teacher, I need to see how my students are thinking or explaining the problem. If I could see them, I'll definitely try to use like Microsoft Whiteboard. That's just one I could think of right now.
Got a whiteboard here. All right.
All right, so we're gonna all share one, like do round 1, 2, or 2. We're gonna go with that because I want to hear what else Elise has to add too. Because I know we're gonna be like, oh yeah, this, oh yeah, that. So my top one is, are you in your right Chrome browser? Because, and Google is already the man. Google's just it. So if we're living in the Google Chrome browser, are you really in your Chrome browser and optimizing it so that you can either save your passwords and bookmark everything so that if you're not using your device, or if you've got multiple email addresses that you're utilizing it for? Because like I have a work Google account, I have a personal Google account. I need to separate my lives. So are teachers doing that for themselves and teaching their students to make sure they're working at school when it's at school, and then do your home stuff at home so that we don't have to see it? That's my tip, to be like, just be in the right place on Chrome and browsers and stuff to make your school life and your home life more streamlined.
Okay, so for this first round of this lightning round, I'm gonna revert back to my IORAD, but I'm also gonna throw in Screencastify. Those both are recording features. Again, if I'm trying to communicate with my students, whichever, like all students, but especially our English learners,
right?
I want them to see what I'm doing on my screen. And let them view it, and it doesn't take up a lot of data. So if they're using hotspots, it's not going to kill the hotspot. If they're at a cafe or whatever, it'll be real quick and easy. So IORAD and Screencastify for how-tos for your students.
Okay,
all right, round 2.
Okay. So picking back with not having the students turn on their cameras, right? And this is not something like a tool you need to download, but you can use PowerPoint, for instance, and make a nice background, right? Valentine's coming up.
Yeah.
So make the background and then or make something fun for them, right? And they'll be able to want to turn on the camera so they can see their faces, but they have that fun background. A lot of times they don't turn their camera on because they are scared of what they're going to see in the background of themselves. So, but if there's something that covers that behind them, you'll definitely be able to, bring that piece in for them as well. So definitely that.
That was a good tip.
That is, no, see what I like of that is like have the kids create a background, but then they don't even have to have the camera on. Like if I put on a background, I can close my camera. So you just see my background and then I'm a voice in there. So then you just know that there's still something there. That could be fun. Okay.
Yes.
And let's totally knock out what I was going to think about here too. So Elena, if you've got your second one you want to go with.
I do have my second one.
Do it, because I can't remember mine.
So my second one, I'm going to start with an output. So a really cool way to get an output, get our kids to be able to script, right? We want them to write storyboard. Using storyboard really provides them. It's kind of like picking your background. You pick your image, and then they're required to write. So they have to script everything for the storyboard. And of course you can take it a whole other level and record, but that's output, that's going to be another form of output. But definitely storyboard is a really cool just platform where kids can create.
All right. Thanks for reminding me what I was going to say, because you said the word board. So I'm also going to put out Jamboard. And I haven't played with Jamboard much yet. I'm still working on my learning skills, but it's there. And it's incorporating that whole collaborative feature. And so, also since it's kind of a Google slide deck piece, you're able to put in pictures, put in videos, draw on it if you want to. So it's really a good tool for putting multiple media together in one space, but it's also, in the moment. Or a teacher can turn around and create a Jamboard where it's a manipulation tool so the students practice a concept. And this has really been fun. Gifted Talk is one of my favorite Twitter follows, because she is a GT teacher. So she's going, how can we innovate the experience? And honestly, these are all things that are just good teaching. So why not use it? It's not just for GT kids, it's for any kind of student. But getting that concept of a Jamboard to manipulate, either the students put stuff together or you're putting things where the kids can actually, and I keep saying kids, but our students can show and practice the learning, whether it's a manipulative version of it or putting something in together to show what they know.
All right, round 3, last round.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, come up with a good one, Arelys.
Oh, okay. Definitely picking back with the Flipgrid, right? I could embed Flipgrid within Peer Deck, but using Flipgrid, I could create a playlist. So that way I could promote more the students' oral responses, and they'll start they're all TikTokers, right? They all love that. So maybe doing some sort of fun way, interactive way, and create the playlist so that you see all of the students, doing their thing of whatever response they got to do. So definitely I'll add to that, the playlist on Flipgrid.
Well, you're making me go back to just talking about that playlist in YouTube, but I really want to. I think that is an untapped tool, because we gotta say, oh, there's I know we've all joked there's a YouTube for that, because there's a video for that. There's something for that, but let's get a chance to go find those videos, or making your own videos, to create that playlist in YouTube, because I think that we're all trying to recreate the wheel, but there are wheels out there that fit. So why don't you find the one? And then if you like a YouTube video, or you need to make your own, we have district Google accounts, so that we have that opportunity to curate our own in that way and put those things together and put that out for our students or our families to utilize. So it is in a safe place. So YouTube can be a good place if you know the right YouTube videos to find. That's what I'm going to end out with.
My last one for this round is going to be, it's going to be for an input, Edpuzzle. Edpuzzle.
Yes, I was waiting for someone to spare that one.
Yes.
It's one of my favorites. So, teachers can use, any type of, whether it's a TED Talk or whatever kind of video, or whatever kind of source that they want, and they can have that pause and interaction with the students. And again, you can watch them. It's easy to set up your classes, and it's a really cool and easy tool. Again, oldie but a goodie. Just like the clothes from the 90s are coming back. I'm so excited. And so to the tech tools, right? But Edpuzzle for sure.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for sharing and joining me today. I'm hoping that we can inspire others who may listen to this podcast to want to go out and try some of the things that we share or think about and reflect on their practices when supporting their English learners in class. And hopefully we can come back again and have another discussion, because of course there's more to discuss and more to talk about. And so thank you again for joining us. But before you guys leave, if you could just share how our listeners can be a part of your network and maybe follow you and be a part of your network on social media.
Hey, that's always great. We need to continue this conversation. Podcasts are just one way of doing it, but I'm on Twitter, and it's at Science Lab Girl. That's where you can find me. That's pretty much my main place, and that's because I was a science lab teacher right after and that's where I got to learn how to deal with kids, both all three ways: mainstream, ESL, and bilingual. Because that's who I met in my classroom, and it was more fun. So at Science Lab Girl, all normal spelling.
For me, it will be Twitter as well. The best way to find me is Barreto Paz, all together. From Arelys Barreto Paz will be basically that. And that's the best way to find me as well.
I too am Twitter, and it's at cause I said so. Not spelled the normal way. It's cause I said so. But yes, so it's at cause I said so.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you guys for joining me today, and I look forward to sharing this with others and getting feedback and seeing who gave the top tips. And so thank you again for listening, and teching may not always be easy, but it sure is fun.
Thanks so much, Doc.
Thank you for listening to the Tech It Up Talk podcast with Dr. Mac, your host with the most passion for supporting educators on using and implementing technology. Be sure to connect with me on the Tech It Up Talk Facebook page and Twitter and Instagram at Tech It Up Talk or at Dr. J.E. McDonald. Now, I know teching may not always be easy, but it sure is fun.